Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Well, here we go, Josh. We're here.
We're here. Yeah, here we go. It's been a while since I've even heard that. I don't even know if I know how to do this anymore. It's been like a month, but we're gonna
Yeah.
try though. So we're trying this again. We had a whole plan for our most recent episode like a month ago, and then for various reasons we had all kinds of things going on, and I'm still working at the TV station. We're still going full time, and I'm still going to work every day and all that stuff. But yeah, the coronavirus has definitely caused upheavals in both of our lives. But we're still both here. We still both like movies, and we're still gonna talk about movies. And even though you can't go see a movie in the theaters right now, I've still watched a bunch of movies. How about you?
I've watched a couple of movies, but I've also been catching up on the series, Netflix series and or Prime, Amazon Prime. I actually got quarantined in Maryland, away from my hometown of Norfolk, and they have the best TV channels in the world at my brother's house where I am sequestered. You take the good with the bad, I suppose. There's a lot of bad going on, but this is one of the lighter touches of the world right now. So I have seen quite a few of the shows that I've been wanting to catch up on and or new seasons of and or shows that I have not had a chance to even think about. But I have seen a couple of movies. I have seen, believe it or not, all the Harry Potter films. My
Ooh.
father loves those movies, and they are showing them nonstop on one of the stations up here. So we have seen 1 through 7 and 8, part one and part two, if you want to call seven, one and two. And they're spectacular movies. And now they're showing Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And I'm probably going to watch that 100 times because those movies are spectacular. So I am in the middle of watching The Farewell again. I just started it last night. Only got about 45 minutes into it, and I'm in love with it as much as I was the first time I saw it. You ever go to see a movie a second time and hope to dear goodness gracious that it is what it was the first time you saw it, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's not, you know? And that's a scary feeling, but that film is spectacular. The performances are standing up. It will be the movie that got forgotten. It will be
Mm.
talked about years from now, 10, 15 years from now. They'll be like, why was that not nominated for anything? In particular, of course, supporting actress and actress, which we've talked about a million times. And then the only other thing that have seen was Room. I saw Room again. We
Mm.
had talked about, well, actually, my niece has come up with an idea for a podcast where we read a book and watch the movie and compare the two, because that's something we haven't done before. And I happened to be reading Room. Why? I don't know. I was in Target before this whole world turned on its end and picking up supplies. And I was like, oh, I saw that movie. Let me read that book. So we will be doing a podcast with that idea in mind, maybe not Room, but it was very interesting to read that book and then to see that movie. And I'll end my movie watching going experience, and then I'll let you talk about yours, and then I'll go back and talk about some of the shows that I've watched. I have discovered that I can understand when I'm watching like a costume designer design something. I can kind of comprehend, can't do it, but I can kind of comprehend it. When I see a production design, I go, oh, I can comprehend how somebody could come up with that. An actor, a great actor. I would love to say, oh, yeah, I perfectly understand how they come up with what they came up with. What I don't understand and I can't wrap my brain around is how do you take a book and transpose it to a movie? Like, how does that process work? So I
Mm.
think my new favorite Oscar category is going to be Best Adapted Screenplay because I'm watching Room after reading it thinking, oh, they moved that to there, they moved that to there, but that's still there and that's still there. Wow, they got it all in, but they did it in a cinematic way. Brilliant.
Hmm.
So what have you been watching?
I've rewatched a few things. I've watched some new things. We watched a bunch of when my sister was here visiting us. She was going through all of the Marvel movies, so we caught her in the
Yes.
Thor: The Dark World through Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 segment. So we we watched all those in between those two. I rewatched Green Room. I've found myself, I don't know why, but you could probably figure it out. But I found myself like gravitating towards things where people are in enclosed spaces. And
Go
so, yeah. So I rewatched Green Room, which is still amazing. And I rewatched, well, this doesn't really fit in, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I rewatched that one. I'm just trying to go through movies that I've rewatched. The James Bond movies, if you have Amazon Prime, they're all at remastered in 4K and available on Amazon Prime now, like all of them, all the ones, I guess, previous to Daniel Craig. So I started at Dr. No. I haven't seen that movie in a long time. And I thought that was really cool. There's just some amazing scenes, like his introduction as James Bond is just amazing. And that film does a lot to establish a thumbprint that is used effectively throughout the rest of the series. And I just love that whole series. And I we also rewatched a couple of fun movies, The Karate Kid and The Mexican, which is one of my wife's favorites. She loves Julia Roberts and she loves Brad Pitt, and you put them together in a movie, and it's actually, I think it's a cute movie. It's a really funny movie. It's Brad Pitt. It's really Brad Pitt playing that Burn After Reading character before Burn After Reading, and it's an interesting movie. Gore Verbinski directed that somehow, weirdly enough. I finally caught up with Good Time. That's the Safdie brothers film before Uncut Gems. I'm working my way up to revisiting that movie. I don't know if I'm ready for it yet, but I'll get there. So that is definitely a frenetic movie. And getting back into the confined into a small spaces arena, I rewatched The Invitation. And that movie, that can mess you up. So that's Karen Kusama's film, written by her husband and his writing partner, Phil Hay, I think is his name. And it's a movie about a broken up couple, and we even did a whole podcast on it. So if you want to hear what I thought, what Paul thought on it, I don't think my opinions have changed very much, but it's good, solid suspense filmmaking, and it takes a lot of things that I think that Hollywood, and you might have more to talk. I think you did talk about it in the podcast, like the culture of LA and what that can do to groups of people, and so I thought that was an interesting rewatch. But what I wanted to get your opinion on is that I went all the way back to the beginning of Roman Polanski's feature filmmaking career and started with Knife in the Water, which was his last Polish film. It came out in 1962. It's a really small film about a couple, older man, younger woman, going on a boating trip for the day, for the night, and they pick up a grifter, or like somebody who's hitchhiking, and then they end up all going out on this boat, and bad things happen, but it's a prolonged process, and it's a contemplative movie, but it does hold that suspense in there. And then I went right from that one to Repulsion with Catherine Deneuve, and I think that's a better movie. It's his first English-speaking film set in London. It's about a woman who has this repulsion to men, and she lives with her sister, has problems with her sister's boyfriend and his encroaching on her space. She has an issue with a guy who's like coming on to her, and she ends up just kind of like staying in this apartment for multiple days. So I didn't even know. I seriously did not know that was what this movie was about, but that happened. So I was watching this movie and I'm like, what is going on? So I just knew it had Catherine Deneuve in it, and they really play up on that fact that she's just so stunningly beautiful, but then it's juxtaposed with her just her issue with men, and they don't give much of a backstory, but it's talk about suspense. Like it's a hallucinatory type of a thing, and it's just crazy. I'm really like digging into the Criterion Collection stuff, like on Criterion Channel, and I just kept watching these older movies. I watched Diabolique. It's a Henri Georges Clouzot film. I watched Wages of Fear a long time ago, and thought it was amazing. It's so good. And then Diabolique is another kind of suspenseful film, and it's just like, as I was watching, I was like, this is totally Hitchcock. And come to find out that like him and Hitchcock would like go back and forth, and they definitely had kind of like I guess somewhat of a agreeable competition with each other back and forth. So that film's really cool. It's another suspense film. It has murder involved in it. It's French, and it was pretty crazy. And then lastly, I'll talk about The Exterminating Angel. It's Louis Buñuel, first movie I've seen of his, and I don't know if it was the right one to start with or not. This is the guy who did Un Chien Andalou, who that's like where the person got their eye cut by a razor. Have you heard of that?
Yes, actually, I do know that.
Yeah. But I know it wasn't real, but still, that's what that was. And that movie, he made that movie a long time ago, over 25 years before he made this movie in 1962. So he's kind of like I guess a provocative filmmaker. And in this movie, it's so weird. It's about these people. I can't even explain it. These highfalutin people go out to a opera, and then somebody invites everybody back to his house. They have a dinner late at night, and then nobody leaves. Everybody just like stays in their parlor. And then when they get up in the morning, they're like, wow, why didn't we leave? I don't know. And then they go to leave, and then nobody still leaves. And then they figure out that like they can't leave this parlor. And so they just stay in this parlor. The whole film is them in this parlor and not leaving. And it's just like, are you kidding me? So I kind of knew that was what it was about. I started watching it a couple months ago, and I was like, I need to finish this. And I was like, I'm already on this train of like people staying in a room. These people are even staying in there for no reason, but it gets crazier from there. But it does also show you like the animalistic tendencies of humans, especially when they get pushed to a breaking point. So it's just a surreal movie that I still am turning over in my head. But it's been crazy, but I've enjoyed it, and I've heard of these filmmakers and I've heard of these stories, but I've never like sat down and watched them. So,
well, you took a deep dive then.
Yeah,
that's good. It's actually not conducive where I'm at right now to actually just pick and choose anything. You know what I mean? There are three other people, and not to make an excuse, but now that you've mentioned all of those films, the last couple ones that you've mentioned, I actually have heard about and know about those filmmakers, but I have no language for a conversation. You know what I mean? I don't know anything really about any of their films. They're, of course, in conversations when other people are talking about great filmmakers. So you're going to have to make me a list, which you actually did make me a list, and sent me what you just recently watched. And that'll be something to where we can catch up when I actually have time to say, okay, I can watch this without having to worry about something else. You know what I mean? What I find ironic, though, is that when I first mentioned to you the podcast idea that my niece Jackie came up with about reading a book and talking about the movie from book to movie, if you will, or movie to book, depending on how you do it, I had picked up Room. And like I said, I had no idea why I picked up that book other than the fact that I do like to read a book after I see a movie and vice versa. I don't have a hang up about that. A lot of people do. The book is better, the movie's better. I don't really have a hang up. We've talked about that a million times. One is one medium and another is another. And I take it for what it is, unless they completely get it wrong. But, then that's their idea of what the movie should have been. So when I posed that idea to you, you said, well, do you really think we should do a podcast about people who are trapped involuntarily in a room 11 by 11? And I was like, oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. It didn't even cross my mind that it was so close to home that it might not have been not appropriate, but actually so topical it might have been uncomfortable on some levels. And
Mm.
then you said, well, why don't we do a catch up podcast? And you sent me a text message. So I wish I had it. I can't access it because I'm actually on
Oh,
my phone
I've
doing
got
this
it right
podcast.
here. I knew you were going to say
Oh,
something about
please
this.
read it. It's
I said,
hilarious.
oh, we can catch up and talk about what we've been watching, along with The Invisible Man. You know, the movie about someone stuck inside their house for a prolonged period of time while a deadly invisible presence is right outside, or maybe even inside.
I laughed so hard. Like, LOL can't even cover it. Because I thought, well, obviously, you go where the art tells you to go. So if the art and music and movies, and you were saying off podcast that when you're at work, you have headsets on and you're listening to soundtracks to movies, you go where the art takes you. So if the art is leading us down the pathway of confined area movies, because I saw a trivia thing about Panic Room, and I thought, oh, I'm going to watch Panic Room again. Now, for a split second thinking about it, apparently Kristen Stewart grew like 4 inches. She grew a lot in the process of making that movie. So she ended up being taller than Jodie Foster, and they had to do things to compensate during the filming of the movie. Because as we know, movies are not always shot in sequence. So not that would have mattered because that movie happens over a one night period of time, at least the crux of it. And then I started thinking about your text and I started going, yeah, I don't think I can watch Panic Room. They're literally inside a panic room the whole movie. And the whole movie takes place inside their house. And I said, what is happening here? Oh my goodness. Well, let me ask you a couple questions about the stuff that you've been watching. Did watching Thor Dark World change your mind at all about how you felt about that movie?
No, I mean, I think that the dark elves or whatever, that's like the
No.
worst part of that movie. It's just an unconvincing bad guy, and it seemed to be just a little meandering, and I didn't. We've gotten so many good Marvel movies since then that it's hard. I mean, they were still just trying to figure out Thor as a character, and what ended up happening is they had to like break him down as a character in Thor Ragnarok to really put him in a position where he could really be a dynamic and interesting character, other than just like the Norse god, or whatever, the god from Asgard who can just like do whatever.
So, no. So the answer is
Not
no.
really.
It just doesn't bother me as much. But a lot of things that bother a lot of people, Justice League didn't bother me as much as other people, and I see the flaws. And
Yeah.
Batman v Superman didn't bother me for whatever reason. If the character is interesting to me, the actor is interesting to me, the performance is interesting to me. There's something about Natalie Portman in Dark World that I like. So I guess maybe I cling to that kind of thing. And I have seen it a second time since the first time I saw it, and I was like, it's not that bad. I think in time the film will not have as bad of a reputation as it has now. I also think it's the film that people attach themselves to when they are trying to find fault in the Marvel universe, when they're in love with the Marvel universe, because everybody can't love everything. That's an impossibility. God forbid we love joy for a long period of time. Us human beings, we have to have conflict, and I'm being sarcastic and cynical at the same time because I believe I'm like this too. So I also think that maybe that's that film. You know what I mean? It's that movie where it's considered the stinker of the bunch, and people attach themselves. This is for whatever reason, especially in Twitter world. Film Twitter, it's so much easier to talk about the negative than the positive. Okay, jumping to The Mexican. I love that movie, first of all. The idea of Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt being in a movie together and then actually not being in the movie together is brilliant. And till 45 to an hour into the film, they are, and then they're not. That I think is brilliant. And also, I think it's an underrated film. I think you're right about that comparison to his performance in Burn After Reading. That's a really good connect the dot moment when we see how Brad Pitt has formed characters. But the reason why I wanted to bring that back up again is because when we talk about missed Oscar nominations, there are some people who it's just been obvious that they missed an Oscar nomination. There's 1,000 of them in 2019. I exaggerate, of course, but there's quite a few. But I think James Gandolfini could have easily been nominated for an Oscar for the Mexican, for the main fact that he plays against type because he obviously plays a character without giving anything away that most people aren't expecting him to play, but he doesn't play it like you would think he was going to play it. He plays it like he would play it. And
Yeah.
there's really that soul-stirring, touching scene in the hotel room, without saying too much, with the wind coming through the curtains and all that other stuff. It's really a beautiful scene, and it's well acted. And I thought, if ever they need to talk about a moment that should have happened for Oscar nominations for James Gandolfini, it should be that movie. And I believe it went under the radar. I believe people wanted that movie to be something that it wasn't. I guess they wanted a Notting Hill with Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts, which I kind of like Notting Hill. I'm not knocking that movie, but I don't think it was what people were expecting it to be. Anyway, real quick before we move on to the main topic, I just wanted to say a few things about a couple of shows that I've started watching. I finally started watching Better Call Saul. I had not seen any episodes up till 2 nights ago, and I'm third episode in. Have you seen that show?
I'm probably about where you're at, but I stopped pretty soon after the show started. I don't know. Maybe I was too close to Breaking Bad, and I never got into it. So I know that it's kind of coming to a close, I guess, or soon will be coming to a close. And it's supposed to be like really, really great show, and I just haven't bit off that huge amount of show.
Right. And everybody that I value their opinion, or at least their opinion seems to, when they say, hey, have you seen this show? And then I watch it, I go, wow, that show is great. Has called Better Call Saul one of the best shows of our life. And I'm like, really? And a couple people have ventured to say that it's even more interesting than Breaking Bad. I'm like, no way. Like, we'll see about that. And I have an instinct where I can not resist, but I know not to watch something unless I'm really ready for it, because I don't want the show to suffer because I'm like, this isn't as good as Breaking Bad. Well, it's not Breaking Bad. So let me get Breaking Bad out of my system. I mean, that's hard pressed to say because that's there forever. But I am going into the 4th episode, and so far I can see myself watching it. You know what I mean? I can see myself continuing. I just started watching Mr. Robot with
Rami
Christian
Malek.
Slater. Yeah. And I've heard 1,000 things about this show and never had a chance to catch it. Brilliant. I'm almost done the first season, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. I've always liked Christian Slater, and I've always liked Rami Malek. I don't have a problem with him winning an Oscar. A lot of people want to bash on him, but he won, and I'm glad he won. But he is really good in this show. Have you seen this show?
Yeah, I've seen the first season, and then
what'd you think?
I stopped after that. I thought it was great, and I think it's one of those. It's done, right? I think it's done now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they went 4 seasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm much more interested in watching it all kind of like in a row than having to wait for each of those seasons, because after seeing the first season, I know that it looks like they've got somewhere that they want to go. And so I have a lot of faith in Sam Esmail. And I've seen, Steph and I watched Homecoming, which was actually based on a podcast. But he created and directed the show version of it. I don't know if he had anything to do with the podcast or not, but this Homecoming starred Julia Roberts, and it's a really good, like short series, 8 episodes or something. And they've got a second season that's coming out this year, starring Janelle Monáe. I haven't seen the trailer yet, but I mean, the stills look really cool. But it's kind of like an anthology type thing, I guess, kind of like American Horror Story, maybe, where it's somewhat tangentially tied somehow, but not really, type of thing. And so yeah, I have a lot of faith in Sam Esmail, so I'm excited to see the rest of it.
Well, it's just topical, and it's clever, and it's a new language, and I don't know anything about computer hacking. I don't know anything about that world, and I appreciate it because the language is very specific. But what the writer has done has made it part of a character study, the language of the technology part of the show for Mr. Roberts. So even if you don't catch what it might mean the first time you hear it, it is explored throughout something the character has to go through at some point in the show and you go, oh, that's what they were talking about. Okay. Because sometimes when it comes to modern technology, well, this might be a defense mechanism because I came of an age where technology was just coming around. It seems to want to be too clever for its own good. And only people who do that will understand the language. Mr. Robots doesn't do that. And I'm also interested in somebody who is so smart they can hack their way through the world, up, down, and what he does with that is clever, but he's a flawed character, a deeply flawed character. And he has a lot of issues above and beyond just being, separate from the world and being too smart for his own good. There are other human issues that he has that I like seeing how somebody who has this issue and this problem works out their issues because the world is so complicated, but yet they're smart enough to do all of this technology stuff. That was fascinating to me. So the real reason why I wanted to bring all of this up was because I have seen The Crown season 3, which I loved. I haven't seen 1 or 2. I needed to see Olivia Colman in something, and I chose to watch that. Brilliant. She's brilliant. I mean, then I watched this documentary about the Queen, or actually about her husband, Prince Philip, and I was watching the Queen and I kept blurring my eyes and I'm like, man, they got that right because Olivia Colman got her down. And I don't even think Olivia Colman does anything out of the ordinary when it comes to trying to be Queen Elizabeth. She just looks enough like her in the sense that if you're going to cast an actress, this is who, and she just has these moments. The other thing I liked about the show was that it's primarily she's the lead character, but most episodes are not about her. And I find that fascinating. I thought, well, that's interesting because the show is called The Crown. It's about the family. It's about the existence of the crown, not necessarily about just the Queen. So I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, I saw Ozark season 3. Mm-hmm. I like Jason Bateman. I like Laura Linney. I think Laura Linney should win the Emmy for this show. I can't think of the actor's name. I should have written it down. Somebody who plays her brother in season 3 should win the Emmy. Spectacular. Unless you've seen the show and care about it, we don't necessarily need to have a conversation. But the reason why I'm bringing all of those shows up was because I stumbled on this show on Amazon Prime, called Tales from the Loop. Have you heard about this show?
Yes.
Have you watched it?
I haven't seen any of it yet. I've been watching too many old movies. It just came out.
I know, right? It's so funny because you're younger than I am, so the history would dictate that you should be watching all of this new modern stuff, and I should be watching all the older stuff. But the beauty of our podcast is that we're the opposite of what we're supposed to be, and you're watching all that old stuff, and I'm watching all this new stuff. Are you interested in this show?
Yeah, I think anything, because I've read a bunch about it, how it's based on this, I guess, Norwegian or Swedish, somewhere up in Scandinavia, painter who paints these scenes of a mixture of nature and some sort of like technological future where things are integrated into an existing world like we know it. But it seems really interesting. Yeah, it just seems it's the images that he makes, like the juxtaposition of like super high tech stuff with, a field, or a sunset or something. It looks really cool. And also that's got to be such a daunting task to create a show based on paintings that aren't necessarily completely tied together.
That's interesting that you said that. And I think we should go ahead and do a television podcast, even though this is a movie podcast. We have done TV shows in the past that we have considered cinematic. We talked about True Detectives because we were obsessed with it. And what's the other one that we talked about?
House of Cards.
House of Cards. And then wasn't there another one too? The Gillian Anderson show.
The Fall.
The Fall, correct. So I think we should, because there's something intriguing about this show. I can't put my finger on it. And I'm interested to hear about your views of it. And without saying too much, the things that you've already found interesting, not knowing anything about the show, is exactly why I'm intrigued by it. Because I was like, what is this? What is Jonathan Pryce is, and I can't remember her name now, not Rebecca Ferguson, but Rebecca Hall. I like both of them. and I have followed her for a long time. She's done a lot of these small independent films that I have always been intrigued by. And I was like, oh, Jonathan Pryce, I love him. Let's see, let's check it out. And I turned it on. So without saying too much, it's going to be interesting to revisit this snippet of the podcast that we just recorded to hear you saying what you said after we start talking about Tales from the Loop, because it's pretty poignant what you just said. It's pretty interesting. So without saying too much, that is something that we should venture into as soon as you get a chance to stop watching all those old damn artsy fartsy movies and catch up with some modern day things here, Josh.
Hey,
No,
I did watch a movie that just came out on Hulu. I watched Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Oh my gosh. That's a great movie. It's a really good movie. Do you have Hulu?
Yes.
Okay.
Hulu accessible. Yes, I am.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's. I mean, obviously, if there's kids around or something, it's not gonna be. But yeah, there are scenes in there. I know. I'm already gonna call there's at least 2 scenes in there that you're gonna flip over, and one of them uses a really interesting digital effect, but you wouldn't know it's a digital effect, and it's really it's arresting. The film is arresting, so it's really cool.
Well, when I have some time after my 82-year-old father stops watching Harry Potter, and he is in bed, it's an interesting world because he is up till about 11 and I am with him. And then I'll sneak back downstairs. I'll take care of making sure he gets to bed okay, which he's fully functional. He can do it himself. But I just, he's in a different environment and he's had some medical things, nothing major, just small minor things that need attending to. And, it's my job and I'm full faith with it. I have no problems with it, but I'm like, hurry up. I got to see the last Tales from the Loop. Hurry up. Come on. So now I'm going to be like, I got to go see Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Got to hurry up. And sometimes he's very open-minded, my father, for being his age, if you will. And he will go see things that I am not sure he's going to enjoy on any level. And then it'll turn out to be something he can't stop talking about. So, we went and saw Mary Poppins. Not that that's anywhere near what you want to call an art house film, but I just thought it'd be fun. He was in love with that movie. He had a great time. We had a great time together. So, all right. So let's move along into the movie about somebody caught in a house where there's a danger outside, maybe even inside, and you can't see it. You can't hear it. You can't sense it, but it's there.
That's right. And it's there. And it's Leigh Whannell's version of the Universal film, The Invisible Man. So have you seen any other versions of this movie? Like, of this story, I guess, from a long, long time ago?
I saw, yes, but I don't really remember it because I think it's one of those ones that was shown to me during like a Halloween weekend or something. And we watched the original werewolf and the original Frankenstein, and we watched The Invisible Man. All I remember is the classic scene, and maybe I haven't seen it and just remember that scene where he unravels his whatever ace bandage.
Yeah, the bandage that's on his head. Yeah, I mean that's kind of it's been done and redone in different versions. There was even a Chevy Chase version. Did you see the Chevy Chase version? Yeah. Memoirs of an Invisible Man or something like that? Yeah, that was
I remember it, yeah. I did see the Kevin Bacon one that was...
Hollow Man.
Yeah. So I guess it's not technically an Invisible Man, but the concept is the same. I thought that film was interesting, actually.
And the reason why I say that is that really it seems like those other versions of this story they lean heavily on the fact that they can make someone look invisible on film. It's not something you can easily do on a stage or without trickery. And this film kind of like goes the other way, and that's the biggest benefit I think that it has, is that it doesn't have a lot of gags where it's like, oh my gosh, look, it's a floating whatever, it's a floating hammer, it's a floating knife. It has some, but it doesn't rely heavily on those. And I think it relies mostly on the performance of Elizabeth Moss, the main character. So I thought she was amazing. And I think from a while ago, hearing a little bit of what you were thinking, you might not have had as been as big of a fan of this movie as me. Now, I haven't seen it in a month and a half or whatever, but the biggest things that I remember are Elizabeth Moss and like how she can play a bedraggled human being, like someone who's like at the edge of their rope. We saw a little bit of it maybe in Us, but it was like a snippet of like her going a little like, left field. But in this movie, she's playing the classic like, nobody believes me, and except everybody in the audience is with her. But yeah, it's her against the world. So I thought she did a good job of playing that. Which, I mean, as an actor, do you think that's something difficult to do?
Well, she's amazing. I mean, it's a balls to the wall tour de force. She's spectacular. But I actually think, not to make light of anything going on in the world, I come from a Boy Scout upbringing, and I think you need to be prepared because that's a motto. And I think we need to be prepared for any emergency. And I'm making light of it, but I'm kind of being serious, but making light of it at the same time. I think we need to be prepared and start sending money to an institution for therapy for Sarah Paulson and Elizabeth Moss, because the last couple of years, I mean, for real, they are tortured women in their films. I just read The Handmaid's Tale and then just watched the first season, and I'm like, oh my God, where does she get it from? How does she do that constantly? And people are savvy and smart and understand things a lot more than they did 50 years ago about filmmaking. When you see a scene from outside of a restaurant and somebody's crying, and then you see a scene from inside, and you see a scene from behind the guy and then from behind her, and she's still crying the whole entire time. It's not like they filmed that all in one take. That's like 7 different takes, which probably took 3 days to do. And she's done that throughout that whole entire process. So that, to me, on a technical level, what she does in The Invisible Man is amazing. And of course, Sarah Paulson is Miss American Horror Story, and she's just a tortured person in those shows. And I'm just like, let's start a fund for therapy for them when they finally mentally break down, because maybe it's therapeutic that they get to do that. You know what I mean? It could be the opposite. I make light of it because I am perplexed by it. I am dumbfounded by the well of talent that Elizabeth Moss has. I have always been and always will be a fan of hers. Of course, Mad Men, and we've seen quite a few of her films. And now that I've seen The Handmaid's Tale, and now that I've seen this, she held a movie in her hands, and she allowed a movie that, in my opinion, is flawed, more flawed than not. And that's some really stupid technical questions about the film that I don't quite understand why the director made the choices that he made, and they're really silly. And you'll probably be able to josh me about them. Get that pun? And tell me why you thought that they were the choices that were made, but they just seem kind of, why is that happening, or why is that there? But other than that, I can't fault the film too much because she just holds it tight. There's not an unbelievable moment or a what's the word I'm looking for? Disbelieving moment, non-truthful moment, untrue moment. There you go, of her performance. And it's stunning. And when you watch her from the beginning of the film to how she ends at the end, it's amazing, because it almost, obviously she's distraught in the beginning of the film and looks totally different until she gets to the end of the film, and then the big reveal happens, if you will. She's made up differently. She's physically different. She's wearing different clothes and everything like that. But it's unnerving how different she is in that last scene than she is in that opening scene. It's almost like she finally got enough money for therapy and got herself together and sent her sister, who looks just like her, into the last scene, because she's unrecognizable from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. So her performance is balls to the walls. But I do have some issues with the film.
Okay. Well, I'll bring up a couple of things that I did like. I liked the sound mixing and sound design, which in a movie like this, you really rely on a lot of that, because it's a lot of like either the camera as the Invisible Man's point of view, or there are even scenes where there wasn't any motion. You'd have a locked off camera and things would be going on. And really the only input that the viewer has is the sound, whether it's, it's somewhat score too, and I thought the score was good, but I think that those scenes which were really tense were the ones that didn't have the score to help to bolster them, and I really liked like that. And when you're not in a movie like this, when you're not moving the camera, it becomes really stressful for the audience because we expect the moving camera, we expect to be in, like when you're in the Invisible Man's point of view, you know where he is, you know where this person who's hunting, the Elizabeth Moss is. But when the camera's locked off and it's just her, or even not even her on screen, you don't know where anything is. Like you don't know what's going to happen next, and that's used effectively in the movie. I talked a little bit about the score. It was done by Benjamin Wallfish, and he did Blade Runner 2049, which is one of the movies that are on my rotation of scores that I listen to at work now. I'm in a very loud room at work, and so I have to like put on headphones or else I'll go crazy. And so you might as well listen to movie scores. But he did the It soundtrack or the It score. And so, and he also did this one. So I thought that it was pretty good, but it definitely owes a lot to the kind of like Atticus Ross, Trent Reznor, like Gone Girl vibe that I got from this movie. A lot of those kind of like sweeping synth sounds and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, a movie that has one of the main characters being invisible, you're gonna rely on sound, and I thought that it was done pretty well. So, all right. What are your main issues?
Okay, so the first two ones are actually, I don't know if it's possible for a person to not understand something and not like it and kind of like the choice at the same time. But welcome to my brain. I was born a Gemini, and I guess maybe I have a duality about me, and that is a gift. I can see both sides of all situations, which pisses a lot of my friends off, but that's the way that it is. So I can always say, hey, that's not my choice, but yeah, I can see why you wanted to go see that movie, or that's not my choice, but I can see why you wanted to eat that. So the first choice is, or the first thing that I didn't quite grasp was the sister. Okay. Now they were estranged because of the relationship she had with her husband. Why were they were estranged, right? But she called her to pick her up in the opening sequence, right?
I don't know if they were necessarily estranged completely, but I do know that the email that he sent, I mean, we're going to get into semi-spoilers, this happens in the middle of the movie, but the email that he sent Elizabeth Moss's sister on behalf of Elizabeth Moss really kind of like was the straw that broke the camel's back. Whatever kind of like underlying issues they had with each other, that was it, and she was done.
And I kind of like the fact that it's not mentioned at first, but then when you get that email, you have to know something of the substance of the relationship in order to understand that the sister would believe that email. You know what I mean? Like, why would she believe that email if there wasn't something that had happened in their past? And actually, I think even in the conversation in the restaurant sequence, and by the way, I think we should just drop the spoiler bomb right now and just say spoilers from this point on, because there are a few things that I don't want to tiptoe around without, because you know me, I will say it and I will just reveal it. So let's just say spoilers from this point on.
If you want to watch the movie, you can watch it right now. I mean, even though it was supposed to be in the theaters, you can still get it on, I think it's Amazon. You can get it for like $20.
Right. Which I think is a really good thing. Yeah, that you can watch on a Saturday. I think it will infinitely be watchable and people will enjoy it. And I think I will revisit it and I will wonder if maybe I just wasn't fully flowing with it at the time. Because it doesn't 100% gel with me. So I kind of like the idea that you don't know much about the relationship with the sister. But then during the restaurant scene, she basically says, you've been doing this my whole entire life and we've had this problem. So why wouldn't I believe this email? And then the crazy thing happens in the restaurant scene, which I thought was really well done because you're not expecting it. And, you've seen things like that in movies where somebody gets set up for being accused of something, but never like that. So I thought that was a really good use of what the idea of an invisible man can do. Okay, second thing is, and I guess it's all based on relationships. I like the fact that she goes to this friend's house to stay, and it happens to be a single father of, I'd say she was a teenage girl at this point, 15, 16 years of age. And they obviously have some form of relationship. The teenage daughter knows Elizabeth Moss's character, and there is some form of relationship with her father and Elizabeth Moss. Friendship, that is. But it's never defined how they know each other, which in a way I liked, because why did we need to know that? We definitely don't need to know why. But I just think it ups the stakes when you understand why the relationships are in place the way that they are. Was the single father in a relationship with somebody who passed away and Elizabeth Moss was friends with her? Were they college friends? Were they ex-boyfriend and girlfriend? Were they? I mean, he seems way too stable for her to have dated him, meaning she obviously has a pattern, because she wouldn't have started dating the guy who becomes the Invisible Man, or her husband, although they have two different names. Not knowing how that relationship developed is twofold for me. Like I said, I thought that was kind of interesting that you don't know, because do you really need to know? Not really. But at the same time, it added to all of these questions about why would somebody, if you know why their relationship began or has been stable, then you understand why he would put up with all of the stuff that he puts up with. Because then his daughter's terrorized by this imaginary thing that they assume is her going over the edge. Mm-hmm. Why would you have that person in your house with your teenage daughter? What relationship would dictate that?
Yeah, I guess for me at least, I was more focused on how this movie was trying to be different than previous movies like this, previous suspense movies, and I was kind of waiting for it to fall into the same traps, and I think that I was more impressed with it circumventing some of those things. And I wasn't as keyed into the relationships. I did notice a shift when the Invisible Man slaps the guy's daughter, who she's staying with, and obviously she thinks that Elizabeth Moss slapped her. But I was kind of jarred when she thought that Elizabeth Moss slapped her, and I can understand the dad coming in and being like, "What? You did this?" But like the girl, I don't know. I would have expected something more of like a confusion from her, as opposed to going straight to like, "You slapped me. What's going on?" It was incongruous with how that scene had led up to that point. And so that part kind of bugged me. But I totally understood when the dad came in and was like, "Okay, I got to get out of here," which ultimately that's the whole point is you got to get her in the house alone with him. And so that's the point of that whole scene. You just got to have a reason. I mean, it could have been that, his daughter had a softball tournament and they had to go that weekend. Like, it could have been something as stupid as that, but they wanted to make it a little bit more dynamic. And then they also wanted to make it so that, they could bring him back closer to the end too. And they can, reconcile to whatever extent that they did, to where he's complicit in what she's doing.
Yeah. Like I said, it's one of those things that, I figured that it wouldn't be something that really bothered you, but it's just one of those things where I understand that the filmmaker is trying to let us know that their relationship is so strong that she sleeps in the same bed with his teenage daughter, their relationship. So she obviously grew up with the girl, you know what I mean? She grew up with this child, and they have that type of relationship where they spend, the night in the same bed and eat popcorn and drink soda and watch movies till 2 a.m. and fall asleep in the same bed together. So he was obviously doing subtle things like that, but for whatever reason, I thought there could have been a way you connected it and it would have made much more sense. And maybe it's completely insignificant to the rest of the film, because I think you're 100% correct. I think that the Invisible Man tricks, if you will, whatever you want to call them, they're really brilliantly done because you haven't seen things like this before. But that does lead me to two things that I know sound so silly when I say it. One is more actually not plausible deniability. What's the word? Suspension of disbelief. Why was there a Christmas tree undecorated in the house when she went to go visit those people? There's never a mention, and I know it's silly, but it just kind of like made me go, was this supposed to tell you what time of the year it was and what kind of people they, because there's a whole bunch of people who don't even take their lights down outside their house ever. And then there's people who like don't want to take their Christmas tree down, so they put red cutout hearts on it and call it a Valentine's Day tree in February. There are those type of people. And all of that is enriching the story somehow. But there's that artificial tree in the corner of the living room. Tell me you noticed it at least. Did you at least notice it?
I didn't notice it. I did not notice it, no.
I don't understand how people can't notice. Maybe it's in my head. Maybe I made that up. No, it's there. Okay. And I thought to myself, why is it there? What is the reasoning why it's there? Now, one might say, maybe I wasn't paying attention to more important things, but we talked about this before. There is no choice that's made just because. That cup of coffee is that kind of coffee for a reason in a movie. There is a reason. It's just not blue. They go through 25 swatches of blue before they find the blue that they think fits what they're going for. So why was this art? And you never even noticed it. And then it's undecorated. So was it before Christmas or after Christmas? Is it not supposed to be a Christmas tree? What? And then what's the deal with why she got him a ladder? So was it Christmas? Because why would she buy him a ladder? Because doesn't she buy him that ladder?
She bought him a ladder because he was having problems with his old ladder at the beginning of the film.
Which is going to lead to something else with Okay, so she did buy him the ladder.
And that ladder allows her to get up into the crawl space.
Which brings me to my second thing, that I think when you do a film like this and you're expecting the suspension of disbelief to be dialed up because you're expecting somebody to believe that somebody is invisible and you don't know why or how they're invisible, which you find out later on in the film how it's plausible in this world for him to be invisible. So when you don't know that somebody is invisible or why or how they're invisible, or even if they are invisible, then there are small little things that you do that have to be solid in order for my suspension of disbelief to stay intact. So when she throws that paint on him and then you see him or the form of him for the first time in that kind of like bubbly type suit. Then when he runs away or it runs away and she starts to come down the ladder, I know it's insignificant and you probably didn't even notice it, but the paint on the floor looked like milk, not paint. And I was like, she just dumped a whole gallon of paint on that guy. Why is that not splattered everywhere? And then she starts to follow down the hallway, and there's like little drips of white paint. When you go back and watch the film again, watch that substance that's on the floor. Then, and I understand that this is by no means important, but for me to not come out of the film when things like this happen, in order to buy into the film all the way to the end, I have to have things like this be at least plausible in the world that you're in. Maybe not in the real world, but in the world that you're in. So even if it was like she opened it up and she smelt it and it smelled disgusting, old paint separates and the oil or whatever comes to the top of the paint can. So when she threw it on him or whatever's there, then it would have had a different consistency. I'm aware of how insignificant this is, but I got to make this point. Then they go to the kitchen right before that epically great scene where he lifts her up and moves her across the floor, which is really well done. Mm-hmm. She goes and she sees the kitchen sink running, and there's like little globs of milk all over the place, which are supposed to be where he washed off this paint. And then when you see the suit later on with all of the optical things in it, how did he get all that paint off of him from that kitchen sink and still not be able to be seen? I was like, you're pulling me out. You're pulling me out.
Mm,
And I know you probably didn't even care, didn't even notice, didn't even bother you. But for whatever reason, those small little details affect how I see the rest of a movie. Because you want me to believe that there's an invisible man. And I was believing it. That scene when she pulls on the blanket and he stands on it. Woo. Excellent. Well
that's
done.
like the best one. Yeah, that's so good.
Well done. When he's in the chair, which you've seen before, but still well done because they got the impression right. So I don't know
Mm,
if that's a computer effect or how they did it, but the impression is right. Usually it looks like two butt cheeks and a backbone. But they got like the way he was sitting in it. You could tell he was sitting like closer to the edge of the chair. And then when he left the chair and the chair kind of like floated back up or the cushion kind of came back to its natural position. I was like, that kind of stuff right there makes me believe there's an invisible man.
hmm
Then you get to the kitchen scene and he's washed off all of that paint, and there's a crap ton of that paint. He's washed it all off and able to become completely invisible in the time she comes down the stairs to the kitchen through the kitchen sink. It made it hard for me to buy into it. So for that first couple of seconds of that brilliant scene, because it looks like an invisible person is lifting her up and shoving her up against the wall. And then when she gets thrown across the table, I don't know how they did it. I don't know if they had somebody in a green suit and it was a green screen type of thing. I don't know what they did, but it really looks like they got everything right. The way her clothes kind of clumped together from him holding
hmm
on to her, the way that she's lifting up looks like she doesn't look like she's in a brace and being lifted. She actually looks like she's being lifted up by her clothes. Her back goes slumps down, her neck goes back instead of forward. It's really well done. So the long and the short of it is, I will probably watch that movie again and not think twice about those things now that I got to talk about it and it's going to go public. But I just do you at least understand why those kind of things would pull me out.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I totally understand that. I guess, especially the first time I watch a movie, I'm more focused on, shot selection and how the camera's moving and sound design and things like that to where, yeah, I think a lot of that other stuff, that consistency of the paint and things like that, I'm just trying to move through to the next thing and take in as much as I can, and yeah, obviously can't take in all of it, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff where I think for me I would probably notice that stuff after two or three viewings, once I've gotten all the other stuff down.
Well, it's like a scale. It's like on one side of the scale, you have those things that pull me out. But then you have the other side where, the epic kitchen scene, as it will be known from this point on, is so well done that the scale starts to tip in that position. And then you see when you first see the costume kind of messing up, or the whatever you call it, the uniform, the invisible uniform thing. When you first see that in the
The
mental,
suit.
yeah, the suit. Thank you. All the words I can't think of. Suit. Um, that is so me. But when you first see it faltering in the institution, in the mental institution, if you will, it's really plausible. Like I really believed it, and I really understood that technology probably could work. Some form of projection that reflect, some kind of reflection of light. It's all possible in this plausible world. So the scale very much tips back the other way for me by the end of the film, and I was satisfied as a moviegoer seeing the movie. I just think I would have been blown away by it if I hadn't had the scale kind of tipping to the other side at one point. You know what I mean? Like I would have
Mm-hmm.
come out of there loving this film versus thinking, why am I paying attention to such insignificant things? Like, what is it? Well, there's something wrong with me. But if the film is not doing that, then I have nothing to look at. I have nothing to watch. So by the end of the film and that last dinner scene, oh, I loved it because I love that whole role reversal thing where the person decides to use the technology against the person who's used nothing but technology to abuse them the whole entire film. And
Mm-hmm.
there's life lessons there too. because obviously this is just not about an invisible man and him beating up a woman. It's obviously about her growing as a human being and realizing that she's better than all of this, that she has the strength to move on, because she even says to him, why did you pick me? And a lot of people have interpreted that in a crappy way, that Elizabeth Moss would have never been the woman that that rich guy had picked, which I think is crappy. Because I think she's beautiful and I think she's a stunning looking human being. So they were saying that she wasn't his type. I don't think that's what she means in that scene. I think what she means is, why me? Like, what was it about me that you knew you could do this to me? And so her growing and turning technology on him at the end, fascinating, really well done.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do like how the film ended, and I kind of, it kind of did one of those like fake endings, real endings things, and sometimes that really bugs me. But when the kind of fake ending happened, I felt like there was gonna be, you could see the writing on the wall, and half the time I don't do well at that. I know you do pretty well at that, at seeing story beats and seeing where a story's going to go. But for me, I'm kind of like 50-50 on that. I think I've pretty much, dialed it in on this one, but it still didn't make it any less satisfying. And I think, you're right from what you were saying earlier. It has a lot to do with her performance in that last scene and the kind of the total reversal of her character from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. The beginning of the movie, she's getting up and she's worried about every breath that he's making in the bed as she's trying to escape him. And by the end of the movie, she's in complete control. And so you really do see a character arc through this film. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, I like the whole idea of V is for Vendetta, where you take a character who goes through such a traumatic experience that they come out a completely different person on the other end, but they come out the person they were supposed to be to begin with. And it reminded me of Natalie Portman because, she, and you've seen that movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is traumatized during that film and captive in a small cell by somebody causing her pain, and an unforeseen pain giver, if you will, a threat that she has no control over. Isn't it ironic, don't you think? But the victory and the satisfaction that the audience feels when those people rise above it. And, it's a strange comparison, but the end of What's Love Got to Do with It with Tina Turner. She was beat left, right, up, down for 25 plus years. She broke her nose. That's the least of what he did to her. And then he comes to her opening night for a new album as beginning to be, one of the biggest superstars of all time with one of the biggest albums of all time, Private Dancer. And she's getting ready to show this club of people who've come to see her, this is my new music. And he comes in with a gun and she's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to pistol whip me? Ooh, okay. I got a whole club full of people coming to see me. And she just gets up and walks down the stairs like, dude, you have no power over me. And I like those endings of movies. They're powerful. At the same time, you realize that a human sometimes has to go through things before they can come out the other end. And the fact that somebody who was so cruel and did so many devastating things to them have no power at all anymore. That's a good thing. It's a great statement. So in the end, when I walked out of The Invisible Man, I was like, okay, I can dig it. I can say I liked it. We'll see. Second time's going to be interesting how much the other stuff that we talked about or that I talked about did or didn't influence me. So there you go.
All right. Yeah. I'm interested to see it again a second time also, but I got so many old movies to see. I just can't, I can't get to it. So.
Yeah, I just started thinking of all the old movies that take place in one room. Don't watch anything Alfred Hitchcock has done recently.
Oh, well, because I just watched Rear Window like about 3 months ago. So, yeah.
That's the epitome of it, And then Rope, that all takes place in
I haven't seen that in a long time. Yeah. Strangers on a Train. That's Strangers on a Train.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I want to see that. I've never
It's okay.
seen that.
I mean, Yeah, it's I don't know. It's not as dynamic as some of the other some of his other movies, but it's cool. So there's a lot of movies that we can still watch that are just people in a room either by themselves or trapped. Any kind of like, oh, The Great Escape. There you go. See, we need to start watching prison escape movies so you can get
Well, I was
out.
just thinking of Shawshank Redemption, but don't do that because he's locked up for like 20 years, so that's not good.
Oh,
You know what
no,
movie
that's
you
bad.
need to watch? Watch Forrest Gump. He's
Oh,
all over
that's
the
true.
world. He's
He
never
is.
confined into one place. Well, although he is confined to that bus stop throughout the whole entire movie, but that's,
Mm.
by choice or accidental choice. Yeah, watch Forrest Gump. Just be good. Or keep with Marvel movies because they're all over the universe and galaxies that we don't even know of.
That's true. Yeah. That's awesome.
There you go.
All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. And you can tweet us at actorengineer. We'll see you next time.